I am Jed Applerouth. I'm very happy to be here tonight with you all. We have an hour together to learn about helping kids start, helping kids persist and do homework and other things, helping with motivation, and also kind of reframing motivation in terms of what that is and how it looks with our kids. We're going to be having a recording of this conversation, so know that we will send it all out. And also at the end of the talk, I'll save a few minutes for questions. But it's a pretty full deck. I cover a lot of territory, but you'll have a recording if you want to go back and watch through. We can see it again. All right, so let's jump in. Motivation, all about motivating kids. So first, kind of a general caveat, because where I'm talking about, parents, you motivating your students to do homework, and there are limits to this. And as parents, you know this in terms of how much can I push, how much can I pull, or using threats, using carrots and sticks and things, because ultimately the kids, they're in charge of their own academics, and we can do so much. We can support, we can scaffold, we can help, provide resources, but the students have to do the work ultimately. And just be careful, be thoughtful about the relationship, between with your kids and their homework, because it's their homework, it's not yours. And so in some families, completing homework can become a power struggle, and then there's control, and it gets kind of ugly because you can't force kids, you can't do it for them, and you can't care about it more than they care about it. That's one thing. And understanding that our kids, they may not all be A students to every stage, middle school, high school, college. At some point, they may be into other things more than school, which I've seen students ebb and flow over the years. But there can be consequences, and I think parents need to set limits. But ultimately, it's up to the kids to go ahead and do the work. So motivation, we can help, but ultimately the kids have to want to do the work. All right, some basics, motivation, foundation. All kids are motivated. All behaviors are motivated, but they may not be motivated in the direction that you want them to be motivated. They could be motivated to get the highest score on this game, or motivated to spend the most time with their friends, or have a 1,000-day snap streak, or there's something that they're into, but it may not be, the academic direction that maybe you prefer. So be mindful of that there are different, the idea that my kid's not motivated, like, no, just it's going in a different direction. And can I shepherd it? Can I move it some? But not they're just flat, and unless they are depressed. But typically most kids are, moving their energy in some direction, but they may not be the one we prefer. So it's important to think about that in terms of what is motivating my kid, what is driving them, what are they into, and why. And for some, they're academic, they're just working, they're cooking, they're trying to get this GPA, they're competitive, they want to outdo their peers, or they want to attain a certain goal for school, or they just, love school. Not all kids are built like that at all times. And so my thing is listening to your kids, like, what are their short-term and long-term goals? What are their dreams? What are they afraid of? What are they, what are they thinking about? And sometimes, I have some kids who are really into video games. One of my students is on scholarship. He got into a school, was on the esports program, and he felt that would be an angle to help him be competitive in the college admissions process. And it actually served him at certain schools. And so all of his video game playing, it wasn't just wasted. It actually was part of the appeal to the college. Kind of insane, kind of crazy. But the world is new. And my thing is that understanding the students actually gives you some currency to help motivate them. If you know what motivates them, it helps you as a coach, as a parent, as a teacher. So what specific, language of motivation does this kid, get interested in mastery? I want to be the best at something. Or is it, social motivation? Or is it control and power? Is it what's driving the behaviors and what's relevant to the person? And that's really important. You can frame motivation in terms of two big pieces. There's intrinsic and extrinsic. And then intrinsic, the behavior itself, the activity itself that I'm doing is the reward. So we do things like, watching Netflix. It's not for any goal. There's something pleasurable about it. Some people, they love to read, they love to play chess or play golf or paint or do whatever, or cook. Extrinsic is there's something outside of the behavior that I'm trying to get, whether it's a certain grade that I want that'll help me down the road, whether it's a certain degree that I want. But the activity is not the reinforcing thing that's really fun or exciting or lovely, but I'm doing it for this. And most activities have some combination of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, where I may like part of it, but also I'm aware that it counts, and then the number matters and so forth. Rarely do you see the purity of it outside of our hobbies. that are purely intrinsic, or some people it's like their jobs are purely extrinsic. Hopefully we find some inner pleasure from our work, but there are people who do it just for the money. And so it's being mindful of that in our kids, and every class could be different. They could be motivated towards this subject, not this one. They'll work for this teacher, not this one. I have a student I'm working with now who's struggling tremendously in an online class format in college, but he loves his in-person classes. So it's like his drive, he's like, he checks out and floats away for the online, but he's very engaging in class. So it really varies. It's not this kid is motivated or not. It really is specific to a class, to a course, to a teacher, to an activity. One thing I've seen before, I've done before sometimes, is try to find a way to up the intrinsic motivation. And you can do that by gamifying, by having some kind of game or challenge. So a lot of kids like games, trying to push themselves. And I've done this before we're teaching a certain concept, and I ask, how fast can you do it? And I've seen parents do this for, kids are trying to do it, the room's a mess. How fast can you clean your room? What do you think? A minute, minute 20, ready and go. Suddenly a very mundane task becomes more interesting because the student has made a wager, or they have a guess, or they're trying to beat an outcome. And then suddenly that in and of itself is reinforcing and motivating. That can work. I've seen it with math. Can we do these math problems in how about 5 minutes? What do you think? Ready, set, go. And then, so that can work, not always, but that's one strategy I've used over time. It's important that your belief in the student is paramount, and the expectations you set for your kids is really meaningful. You have to, believing in your kid, that their ability to accomplish their homework, and making sure that they know that. If you are very nervous or anxious and you're worried, is my kid fragile? Is he going to be able to finish the homework or not? Do I have to step in there? I'm going to hover. Kids get a message about that. They get a sense of that this parent doesn't really believe in me. They don't have faith in me. And that becomes something they can internalize. Even if you don't say it, like your body language says a lot. So if you have lots of anxiety and you respond with anxiety when they have negative grades, or if you're afraid, they start to get those messages versus I believe, that the calm centered, I believe in you. And part of it, if you want to motivate your kids, it's doing some of your own inner work, calming down some of your own inner demons and anxieties to help be present and be reinforcing for your kids. So motivational scaffolding, as a parent, as a coach, as a teacher, sometimes if the kids don't yet believe in themselves, the parents do it first, the teachers, the coaches. And I believe you can do this over time. The more I reinforce, I believe you got this. Eventually they internalize that and they say, okay, I believe I can do this. So there is a transfer of that belief, but you can hold it for them. You become what we call a self-object for a time. You hold that potential for them until they can hold it onto themselves over time. There's some fun research, David Yeager and Jeff Cohn, looking at motivation and expectations. This is a college class, an intro psychology class. And they gave feedback. They had two sections, like section 120 and 121. And they graded papers and they gave them a note at the end. I'm giving you these comments so you'll have feedback on your paper, versus I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know you can reach them. And students could again go and rework their papers and turn them in for a higher grade. So when given the chance to revise their essays, the one who just had the basic feedback condition, 4 out of 10 kids did revisions. The one where the teacher said, I expect a lot of you, 8 in 10 did it. And that's a very simple little demonstration that when someone else believes in you, they believe you can accomplish a lot, that affects your internal sense of your own abilities. So, as a tutor, as a parent, as a coach, when you felt like someone really sees you and believes in you, that affects your behaviors. So that's just a note there. Carol Dweck, powerhouse at Stanford, wrote an important book, Mindset, but also has decades of research before Mindset, looking at feedback, looking at, how feedback affects mindsets. And when we give, praise, and it's interesting, I have with my own kids, she's as averse to saying, you're so smart. I still do it sometimes, but also I really do balance it and praise your process. And I praise how much of a learner you are and how much I see how hard you work. And to foster a growth mindset, you want to do more of that, of reinforcing how creative you were, how you found resources, how you worked really hard, you got help. And so you reinforce the process versus saying, geez, you're so smart. Because kids can get into the thing of the imposter. What if I'm not smart? And I don't want to show people that I'm not smart by taking a risk. And so it may create risk aversion. If you tell them all the time that they're geniuses and they're brilliant, but then they realize, oh, I'm actually not, then suddenly they start to withdraw versus you tell them you're awesome at learning, you're a great learner. And it's like, okay, I can learn things. I am. So that's Carol Dweck. She's a very important person in this process. Rewards, Dweck and also others, DC and Ryan, some researchers talk about you want to use motivational rewards that are not tangible, physical, monetary rewards. They're not contingent, but rewards that are verbal, that are really like, I'm noticing you. They're called informational rewards. I noticed that, you really crushed that quiz, you worked really hard, you got the outcome. I want to celebrate, the work you did. And that's an affirmation, that's approval, that's validation. And we thrive on that. And so in lieu of, here's money for the grade, they're saying use praise and verbal feedback versus using a tangible monetary reward. But also don't hit them with it so constantly where it's, but loses its meaning and power. Make sure you use it when it's appropriate. And then also when it comes to motivation, student language matters. I've helped kids make this shift where I've had students who were not doing well, and they may come and their goal is, I don't want to fail. However, when your goal is an avoidant thing, I don't want to achieve this outcome, that has some negative effects on motivation, on tenacity, on follow through, on creativity, versus I want to accomplish this. Even the tiniest reframe of I don't want to get C in this class too, I want to get an A or a B. Helping students just reframe it in the positive has a positive impact on behaviors. And so if your kids are saying, I don't want to fail, help them reframe it towards something tangible, little things like that. It's important when you're trying to motivate your kids how to start things, do things that are boring or hard. Tell them your stories. When you had a hard class, when you were, back when you were in middle school and high school and college, when you had to struggle, how did you get through it? How did you find a way to motivate yourself? Tell them your stories because they look to you for counsel and whether they admit it or not. And, understanding, my mom or dad, who I have some of their genes, they struggle too in this area and they found a way through it. That helps me, okay, if we aren't so different, even though, you seem all knowledgeable, whatever it is, that you also had a hard time with a teacher in 8th grade, with algebra or with history, whatever, and how you went through it. Additionally, modeling. So we're talking about, we want to encourage kids to do hard things and do things that are boring, and so it's important that your kids can see you at some point doing a hard thing. In deep work, focused, you're turning off your distractions, you're doing something. I used to watch my dad read medical journals, and all of us, he would come back from work and we'd have family dinner. He had a study and he had all of his journals. And I remember he'd spend an hour or two like reading his journals. I'm like, my dad's a person who reads his journals, stays current in his field. And so that was something, apart from his pleasure reading, but he was actually being disciplined and diligent. And so seeing that, it's like, okay, that's how we are in this family. We can focus and do hard things. And that to me was important because whatever you say is, as important as what you do and your behaviors. So giving them a chance to see you working hard is a good thing for the kids. So DC and Ryan, researchers at Rochester in Maryland, very important thinkers past 30 years in motivational theory. Their thought is that humans are pretty similar in certain ways. And we all have a need for competence to feel like we can accomplish and achieve mastery. We all have a need for autonomy. We don't like feeling controlled. And we all have a need to relate to others and feel connected to other people. And these are key aspects to motivation. And so part of it, I'll go through some examples of how to use that, trying to get folks to start things and complete things and so forth. And one of the primary pieces is give kids a choice of like, where do you want to work? As long as it's not a crazy environment, like what kind of music do you want to play, if any at all? How do what snack do you want? What order do you want to do things in? Giving kids choices so they feel like they're not being controlled, or they're not automatons. Acknowledge their feelings as a way to, if things stink or they hate, like, okay, they feel connected, related, validated. Giving them positive feedback. If they're doing well, giving them like, wow, I acknowledge and see your competence. You did so much better on this math quiz than the last one. Like, what do you do differently? Get curious about it. Minimize controlling. You have to, you should. They feel like you're controlling me. And that when, there's always a dynamic between parents and kids in many cases where there's a need to individuate. And when there's too much hovering, too much control, the parents, the kids can act out. And I've seen it when there's, control doesn't always work so well with teenagers. You may have noticed this already. And be mindful of that. And also collaborate with kids, create challenges for them that are meaningful. That's the relatedness. Let's goal set together, that kind of thing. For some kids who seem checked out, and not motivated. There's the reframe, this is from Richard Lavoie, that if the kid would only try harder, he'd do better, versus no. If the kid would actually have some success, then he'd do better. That, again, that's going to reframe his perceptions of his competency, his ability, his levels of efficacy. So if I believe that I can accomplish something and my efforts beget outcomes, then I'll try harder. So if we have no success, I'm not going to try. But some success, realizing, well, my behaviors are tied to positive outcomes, that chain helps me try harder the next time. So, and this is one of the primary people who espouse this theory is Albert Bandura, also at Stanford. They're a pretty important school. His cognitive theory talked about when we have mastery experiences, it shifts our belief about our abilities to accomplish things in the future. And we use this more than anyone, more than someone saying, you've got this, you can do this. Looking to past mastery is our best way to help us calibrate how will I do with the next challenge. So giving kids some success, some mastery can help build motivation. If they feel frustrated, unmotivated, let's find out the right level of challenge, the right level of class, whatever it is, so they feel like I can be a success here, then I'll try harder. That's an important piece psychologically. And then choices. I mentioned, like, I would work with students, I'd have them, pick the music we're going to play in the room or whatever it is, give them little choices. And then so they feel like, they have agency, because agency matters for motivation levels. Talk their talk. I try to listen to their metaphors. If they're talking in terms of a video game that they're into, or a sport they're into, or like soccer, or like, let me go do my reps, let me go and, get on the field, put in the work, and try to, like the homework is like practice, or homework is like, hitting your free throws, or homework is like doing, playing chess or getting ready for debate, whatever it's like, try to find a metaphor that can work with them. So you're speaking in their language. And there are times when kids really just don't care and they have the ability, they have the skills, they just do not like the topic or the teacher. And I don't try to deny that. I try, Marsha Linehan said, always validate what's valid. So your feelings are, you really dislike this, the class, the framework, like, I got it. This is a hard class. And there are going to be times in life when we have a hard class, or we have a hard boss, or we have a hard XYZ. And part of it is, what do I do with that? Do I crumble? Do I collapse? Do I give up? Or do I find a way through? And there are times when kids like, this stinks. I hate the teacher, I hate the subject. Gotcha. But, can we beat this system? Even though the inputs, you don't like the teacher, let's not make it about them. Let's make it about you and what you want and the outcome you want for yourself, independent of this teacher who may be miserable or awful or mean, whatever it is. But what do you want out of this? And then can I help you serve your values, your interests, irrespective of the conditions you're in? Because, you're going to find yourself sometimes in hard systems. And I explain that. And can we peg the outcome to something that serves your values? So it validates the student and they feel like, wow, you're really listening to me. And then you get some currency, some rapport with them. And that's motivational currency. All right. Sometimes Paul Tough, who I think is lovely, he has written several great books. One of them is about grit, curiosity, like character, essentially. And some students who seem checked out of their schoolwork, they say, you know what, if you help them reframe that these activities have purpose, and these may help other people eventually, like you doing well in this class, getting this degree, getting this, may eventually help someone else besides yourself and help you do good work in the world. For some people who can tie the behavior to further a broader purpose and a broader network of people and the well-being of others, that can actually affect you to actually work harder. A student, trying to finish, organic chemistry, if I do good at this, I may become a doctor and help all these people. And then, okay, so even though organic chemistry sucks, this is for all the people I might be able to help if I can get through and get into med school. Some kind of way to frame how this may help other people. That can be beneficial. All right, so the 3 stages of getting something done is starting a task, going through the hard part when you're distracted and your attention flags, and then finishing a task. So a lot of this is motivating for how do you begin a hard or boring task. So that's the task initiation. How do I break through? How do I start? And for some kids, this is the hardest thing, is beginning. And they'll distract and they'll get off task. And then finally, how do I anchor and start this process? So, and some kids say, I don't know how to begin. I don't know where to begin. And so I'll do everything else except for start. And I might lose 3 hours. I might, and cognitively, you almost always want to downgrade to an easier cognitive task, which is the reason why when we have a hard thing in front of us, I want to go and play spelling bee, or I want to do Wordle, I want to read Reuters or say, I want to do something that's easier than doing the hard thing. And it's because our brains are kind of lazy and thinking takes glucose and resources. I want to be, we're just naturally, we're looking for easier things. But the whole thing is, how do I go and jump into a hard thing? How do I begin a hard thing and not go and play a game or find a distraction? So one thing I like to do is if people are worried about, they're starting a paper or a project, it's like lowering the bar and just jumping in and writing any mess, just starting, write a sentence, right? Just even if it's a hot mess, begin with something. Put the first letter on the page, begin it. Don't be afraid of it. And obviously, and once they have some inertia, we can go back and revise the whole first paragraph, the first page. But encouraging them just start writing something, however inane it is. So just beginning and letting go of any ego, it has to be good, just start it. That's one thing I often encourage kids to do. When they're stuck, when they're just spinning their wheels, there are times it's worthwhile talking about procrastination. I mean, everyone does it to some extent. You as parents do it. We all do it to certain, like how many of you are jumping into do your taxes? Or there are times I wait to the very end, as many Americans do. But what do we do? What's your toolkit? How do you get yourself unstuck when you are putting things off? What's their level of self-awareness? And what rabbit holes, I always go and I'll play music for 10 minutes, which becomes an hour and a half, or I'll go and do this thing, or I'll get on Instagram, it becomes 2 hours. Talk through what their process is. How do they avoid doing a task? And there are honestly lots of reasons why kids put off starting. Some of them, again, it's motivation. I'm more motivated towards other things. This is not my priority right now. It could be they don't value the importance, the value, it's worthless to me. No interest. I hate this topic. It could be there's fear of failure. The kids who are, I don't want to do poorly, therefore I'm not going to start. It could be they don't believe they're going to do well. Therefore they avoid it. It could be they're in an environment that's so distracting that they can't focus if they wanted to. Other things, again, the perfectionism. There are kids who their desire to be perfect stops, where the great inhibits the good. They could be anxious, feeling overwhelmed. They don't know how to start. They're lacking in skills to help them succeed. Or in certain, and I'm actually very guilty, my wife laughs about this, that, I may start writing this presentation until the day before. But one thing I've been doing since I was in college is I do something called self-handicapping, where I wait. And then finally there's anxiety and then I shut off all distractions and I just work. And I did this in college. I did this in grad school, my master's, my PhD. I do it for presentations. I kind of push to the end, and then I use the adrenaline and the cortisol and the epinephrine, and I focus. And that's called self-handicapping, where I don't do poorly, but I do procrastinate until there's an urgency, and then I jump in and get it done. So I definitely understand that approach. And I have kids who are very smart who also wait till the last minute, but they do okay. They get A's and B's, whatever it is. It's a problem when you're putting it off last minute, you're failing, or then you need 2 more days, but that isn't always the case. Some kids use this and they do very well. So what's the root of the thing? And so part of it is, as parents, what's your style? What's your ritual? How do you put off doing things that you need to do? And then talking to your kids. So getting we all understand, what's your ritual? And what are the websites where you get lost, or your cell phone? How do you lose 3 hours? And so again, is it just procrastination or other things? The students is very disorganized. I don't know how to begin this paper. They're very distracted. It could be, I'm deficient in executive functioning, or all these different areas. So before you say, you're not motivated, let's back up and get a look at this. There are times when a kid doesn't want to start because they're lacking in certain skills. I don't want to start this calculus because I don't really believe I know how to do it. And therefore, I don't want to look silly or stupid or face the fact that I don't know how to do it. It could be that. It could be they're having problems with speed, working memory, that they're frustrated, and there could be a hidden learning difference, learning disability. I have a hard time with auditory processing, and I don't want to start playing my Spanish homeworks. I'm going to face I don't understand it. They may need more help, more support, more resources. So in some cases, I may need to go talk to my learning specialist at the school, or go and even do a psychological evaluation when kids are really aversive to doing their homework. What's going on here? What do what's happening here underlying? There are times I've heard from many boys, especially in my time, where this is stupid. I think foreign language is stupid. History is stupid. count, whatever. And so it's sometimes, they're trying to protect their sense of self and their ego. They've had some experiences where they didn't do well. Let's say in Spanish, they got a C and so after my C, then it becomes, this is stupid, they don't care. And I'd rather not care and not do well versus try and then fail and realize that my efforts are inadequate. I don't want to increase my sense of inadequacy. Therefore, I'll just say I don't care. And that's a massive ego defense. And so part of it, though, if I gave them some training, some skills, some mastery experiences, then they'd engage differently. Then they would care more. And so that's the big dynamic here. Is it a lack of skill or a lack of will? And that's important. So skill deficits, is it one certain domain? Like, I don't know how to start an essay, or is it broader? I don't know how to coordinate and manage my time or resources. I don't know how to prioritize things. These are more executive functioning issues. And that is something that I do, for a living as an EF coach, is helping students with their executive functioning, is helping them self-regulate, helping them manage distractions, helping them prioritize, helping them scheduling. And you can outsource to a coach, or you as a parent can provide some support. Sometimes the schools some of them are really good at this. Some schools aren't as good at this, helping kids learn how to prioritize, how to time manage, how to time estimate, all these things. And the executive functions, they live in the front of the cortex. They develop as students age. So where they are at 15 is not where they'll be at 18 or 25. They're going to keep developing these cortical structures, which go, inhibit distraction, help you focus, help you time manage, organize, prioritize, inhibit distractions. All these things get better as we age to a certain threshold. Kids who have ADHD are delayed in this area by definition, in terms of self-monitoring, inhibition, all these things. And so it's all tied, planning, prioritizing, time management, persistence, and so forth. And so in many cases, when students are not very versed or gifted with these executive functions, they may show up as being not motivated because they're really all over the place. They're smart but scattered, is a phrase. And if they just got themselves structured and organized, then their intelligence would be able to come out and shine. But because they're not, like, they don't start things on time, they mismanage the resources. And so in this case, we want to help them build skills, talk to them, engage them at what might help you, start the task, what might help you, so it's engaging their problem-solving skills. Sarah Ward talks about this future sketch where we plan everything we need backwards. What's our outcome? And what are all the steps and pieces we need in place? And let's talk about that. Then partializing, dividing things into smaller steps. When sometimes a goal may seem daunting, I have this 3-page paper paper and I don't want to start because it seems hard. Let's break it down into the 5 sections. Let's do the first thing first, then take a break. A specific attainable goal, do that one, take a break, then we'll come back and versus I have the whole thing, and the whole thing seems really big and daunting, but this front piece, that's about half an hour. I can do that. So help break it into mini successes. And so the same thing, there's a paper coming up. Some kids put it off because it's daunting versus let's break it up. Let's in little segments, little pieces. My thesis, my text by here, first draft by next week, proof by here, turn it in by here. So breaking it up. And some kids need help doing this. The gestalt of the whole essay is too much to handle, but this little piece, I can knock this piece out. And that seems I can manage that. So goal setting, short-term goals. When kids set them, they're more likely to actually attain them, keep to them, achieve them, and it'll affect their sense of mastery. It helps things become less scary. And when kids are verbally encouraged to set their own goals, they feel more confidence, more competence, and more commitment to actually achieve and attain those goals. So goal setting is really important for motivation and for kids. The goals are very specific. I'm gonna do this thing. I can measure it. They're very attainable. It's not I'm failing physics. I want to get an A in the next. No. Let's for failing our next goal. Let's get you up to C. Then let's go for a 78. Let's work by this date and work. Versus I'm going for the A. It's like let's go piece by piece as we build confidence and competency. Many deadlines are really helpful. And sometimes I use artificial deadlines. I know it's due on Friday. Can we have it done this piece by Wednesday? And so if you misjudged how long it would take, you can go get support, get help, but not, have them work towards the actual deadline in case they didn't estimate well how much time things take, which happens a lot with students. And kids who are smaller, younger students may need more help. For the first few minutes, you're there with them, helping guide them get started. And then after you scaffold, they're moving, then you back off, let them work. You don't hold their hand on the whole way, but you help them get started, get over the hurdle, like the hurdle tasks. It's good modeling. So once they've started, they've begun the task, then the whole thing is, how do I continue and not flag and fall apart and do something else, which happens to many kids. So part of that has to do with your environment, the way you've organized your space, your physical space, your digital space, your thinking, learning how to organize at the macro level, and then will help you at the micro level. If I can get the environment right, it affects the task at hand. Very important. The biggest distractions, as you know, we have our devices, and our computers. They are distraction central. And so being thoughtful, and Snapchat, Instagram, gaming will always win because the gratification is immediate. You got, if it's social, validated by others. You're talking to your friends on a gaming console. There's novelty, dopamine is definitely more exciting, but know these things will win in a straight battle of what's more compelling. So we have to expect these distractions, anticipate them, understand them, of what might ping me, what's going to be open, what feeds are open, and how do I inhibit, how do I plan to respond to these distractions? And what's going to happen if I reach for my phone? Am I going to have a consequence where if I keep reaching for the phone, I'm going to go charge it in the kitchen? Or if I'm going to deactivate this or put this on airplane mode? We have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan for distractions, you're already sunk. But so part of it is your environment. You have to be thoughtful about what information that you're letting into your field. Very important. Because every time you get interrupted or you task switch, you're going to degrade accuracy of what you're doing. You become less efficient, and it's going to encode differently in long-term memory. This becomes what we call shallow rates of processing. Deeper processing comes with focus and attention, but every interruption makes sure that whatever I'm trying to learn gets in my brain in a more shallow way, and it's probably not going to be a durable memory trace. So I'm probably going to lose that if I was learning it and I was interrupted 10 times. So it creates shallow processing, which is longer transfer to long-term memory. All right, so, and only about 2 out of 100 kids can actually multitask. The rest of us, we do parallel. We do like mental ping pong. I'm doing this task, then I'm on Instagram, then I'm here. My mind can't be in 2 places. So if I'm trying to do a term paper with Instagram open, or Facebook or Discord or whatever they're using open, or Snap, then it's going to really limit how much I'm learning. So your environment, you are the engineer, you are the master of your domain. And if you engineer your environment right, it does the lifting for you. It gets rid of willpower if you just structure your environment right. Because willpower is going to fail you at some point, especially longer in a session of studying. Willpower eventually breaks down. So minimize your distractions, get what you need. What do? I always drink tea. I have a couple. I have a Pandora channel. I also have an Enya, and I have a Daft Punk stream, which I played 1,000 times. I chew lots of gum when I want to focus. It helps a little more oxygen. I'm chewing, getting some oxygen in my brain, and it helps me move a little bit. A little kinesthetic action helps me focus. So I can work for 4 hours if I'm chewing gum, playing music, drinking tea. So it's knowing what your body needs to focus, whatever that is, doesn't matter. And again, your digital environment matters a lot. What's open, what's turned off. I have something I use. I use something called the Stay Focused app, STAYFOCUSD, and it's on my computer. And I have it so after 10 minutes, the New York Times spelling bee is locked down for the day. After 10 minutes, Reuters is locked down. CNN is locked down. So I can go and spend an hour. And I know that if I'm avoiding a task on the computer, it tells me, shouldn't you be working? And that's the best. So I love that. It helps me. It saves me from myself. And so it's using your tools. So again, I don't need willpower. I have structured, I've built in good systems, which help me focus. So it's up to me to be strong. My devices help me. There's also, you have screen time limits on the phone. I can turn this off for certain times. Very helpful. And the idea here is make what's hard easier and make what's easier harder. So if my spelling bee app is there, I make it harder to reach or impossible to reach by using these apps. And I have my phone not next to me. My phone is on either airplane mode or it's charging in the kitchen. So I make what's distracting easy, make it harder, and make what's harder right in front of you, easier, more accessible, more immediate. And so that's one of the foundations there. Timing is important for starting and taking breaks. Having a good timer, the Pomodoro is a very basic, cheap little timer. You can also use your phone timer, which I use sometimes after half an hour, take a break. Use my watch, use my alarm, very, very simple, good boundaries. I want to make sure kids have a good division between work and play. I've had students before spend hours and hours and hours doing their homework and even cutting into their sleep. And I find out the 7 hours of homework is actually about 2 hours of focused work, but they have their apps are open, they're instant messaging each other, they're doing Snapchat, other things. So they're working, but they're not working. And what I tell them is I want to have a clear division. I'm working, I'm focused, I'm disciplined, and then I'm playing. I tell them, I want to give you more quality play and more play, but let's have boundaries around it. So I focus, I get it done, then I can really properly play and it's more enjoyable versus feeling like I'm partially playing, partially working. Let's get clean divisions. And then everything's better. Then your work is better and your play is better. And you have more play if you can really be focused for the work time. The body. I saw this during the pandemic when I had kids who were not exercising. They were just looking at the screens and their academics suffered and their work suffered. So I've learned that, when you exercise, I have students now who go and play basketball before they do the homework. They'll go and do a jog, whatever it is. But the exercise primes them for focus. It gets your brain going. There's actually neurogenesis, new neurons are forming when you're doing cardiovascular fitness, and it gets your body and brain oxygenated, and also serotonin, dopamine, all these great things. So for many kids, exercise helps them do their homework. So that's important. I've had kids of mine who needed what he gave me this term, the body double, and I've heard of it. He's like, I can't study or focus without another person there to keep my attention. If I'm by myself, I'm going to reach for my phone. But if I'm there with a person who's focused, I kind of borrow their focus, and then I can stay. And this kid is now a second year in college. I was working with him, in high school and first year of college, and he goes to a library. He's part of this fraternity, and he can get a lot more done with another brother at the desk in the library. If they're working, I'm working, and they're getting that cue socially to keep working. And so his GPAs, he's getting A's now in college, but it's really helped him having the presence of a human being. Not a friend per se, but just someone working. I can use their momentum. All right, breaks are really important for doing homework. For knowing when you need a break, knowing when, again, some kids need basketball, and then I can study. Some kids need a nap. I always come home from like wrestling practice. Now I'm taking a nap, and then my brain would replenish, restore, and then I do my homework. Whatever you need, doesn't matter. It's like, but after a certain threshold, an hour, hour and a half, breaks are really essential for kids. There's a concept of chunking things down that the brain can handle so much at once anyhow, and trying to work for 3 hours, forget it. You're going to forget so much, and your brain becomes less efficient as you're blowing through your glucose stores in your brain, and the neurotransmitters, the synapses are getting spent. Your brain needs time to stop and replenish everything. So that taking a break is really important. And also, after learning something for a little bit, stop, reflect, chew, and then go back to a new thing. Don't just keep learning. You need breaks all the time to optimize learning. Routines, habits, rituals are really important. So homework doesn't happen when you feel it, but it happens. This is my homework schedule. This is when I work. This is where I work. It's automatic. The right place, the right time, the right pattern. If you ever read Atomic Habits, I think it's James Clear. It's really great. It talks about habit stacking. You do all these things. Each one becomes a trigger and a stimulus for the next habit. So I get my tea. I turn on this sound. I come in here. Like I'm giving my body all these cues, and now I'm ready to work. I'm stacking these habits in a row, these good habits in a row, or bad habits. Or for me, I may do 10 minutes of this, and then I jump in to the hard thing. So turning things into these routines takes away the willpower and discipline. I always do this. This is how I do it, period. And then also understanding, well, I need more help. Do I have the resources I need? Can I get help if there's a hard task in front of me? This is from my student, Charlie, who's now graduated as my EF student, but we were doing some work. He was in college, and helping him prioritize. How do I know what to do, when to do it? And so I would model with him. Let's lay it out. What are your tasks? First, let's put them in, spit them all out. All right, then I had him structure it. What's urgent? What's due tomorrow? Things that are more urgent, go up the queue. Then we have level of cognitive complexity, difficulty. Things that are harder, go first. Things that are urgent and hard, go very first. And so, because as we go through the day, You want to have easier cognitive tasks later, whether that's reviewing a language or math, but do the big lifting or the writing or the deep analysis first when your brain is full of glucose and you're fresh, versus let's do it at 8 o'clock when I'm exhausted. And we built in breaks after an hour 15, taking a break for 20 minutes, go do whatever, clear your head, come back. Then we're doing the schedule, your psych homework, your review, then take a longer break. Now 7:20 to 8:05, get some food, come back. All right, reading response, half an hour, talk to Dino about this plan, research credit, and then finally, but the later ones, they are lower priority. And so if it turns out that I didn't estimate my time right, my psych homework took an hour, then you know what? I can carve out and I can move out the oral exam session because it's low urgency. It's not for a few more days. So if I've been bad at calibrating time requirements, the thing that versus I saved the important thing for last, now I'm screwed because now I have to do it for it's due tomorrow. And now I saved it for like 9 o'clock. Then I'm going to 10:30 because I'm exhausted, I'm inefficient, and then I lose sleep. So things that are urgent and hard go early. This is an important thing for helping starting a good homework session. And then teaching your kids to skillfully use their calendar, their paper, looking at the weekly focus so they aren't ever surprised by, oh gosh, I had this big thing due tomorrow. When you have the weekly planner, you're never like shell-shocked of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had this thing due. You actually look at the week before you do any homework. Oh, what this week is what I have today, tomorrow, next day, and so forth. Big scheduling. There are times when I'm working with kids where I help them schedule out like the whole thing. What are your activities? I'm seeing friends. When are you seeing your friends? When's mealtime? When do you want to sleep? And I help them try to optimize a schedule so they get everything in there. Kids who really need help with time management. When they get overwhelmed, there are times they're overwhelmed. There's too much on their plate. The name of the game is, can we carve some things out? Do we have to do all of this? Is all this essential? Again, a sense of urgency and prioritization. And then finally, we did task initiation, task persistence, finally finishing. And there are students who do everything and they don't finish. They fall apart, they don't turn it in, they forget that, that happens. And so for one, finishing, learning how to get help. Self-advocacy, help seeking is very important. Girls are better at this than guys, that's documented. But learning, I have some guy friends who, some of my students, there's a person they can reach out to, or they can do Snap with, but someone you can go to who can help you. Whether it's a teacher, a tutor, a friend, someone who can help you when you're stuck, a parent, and so forth. So again, deadlines are important to drive completion, knowing, and I like having deadlines that are artificial, a little bit early, in case you need an extra day, and so forth. Checklists are really helpful. So task completion, there are students I have who love, I have a student in college who checks things off. I cross it out, and that is reinforcing and motivating. Every time I go and cross it off, I feel like I'm getting somewhere, I'm doing something versus this nebulous, there's so much to do, like I'm crossing it off as we go. I love it. Very helpful. And then if they come to you, if parents need to get involved or as a tutor, I try to provide the minimal scaffold and then withdraw it as soon as they're demonstrating mastery and competency. So versus they call me in and now I take over. Don't take over. Provide the minimal, the most gentle, skillful scaffold, and then pull it back because you want to build efficacy in them and belief in themselves. So direct their attention. If they do really well, I want them to attend to what worked and they focused. They did a good job with their environment. So pay attention to what's working for them. And also, I try to have my students to focus on what they did, their behaviors, leading to certain outcomes. Not, oh, it was easy, I got lucky, but you know what? I did these things. I prepped for this much time and this, and you know what? Here was the outcome. And they begin to see the association between their behaviors and their outcomes versus, oh, it's luck or I'm just bad at this. Like, no, your behaviors drive your outcomes. This is something from me and Paul Tough. The idea of mental contrasting, essentially, it's if-then statements. If I get distracted and I end up playing, on the computer or this, then I'm going to turn it off or whatever it is until I finish the homework. It's just an if-then statement. If I can't do this, then I'm going to get help. So before they begin, say, if I can't put my phone away, then I'm turning it off and I'm putting it in the kitchen. So having them think through ways they might get derailed and plan for that contingency on the front end. And then there's, self-consequencing. I think it's very, very simple. If I finish this chapter, then I'll earn 20 minutes on Instagram, or, I'll play this video game for one round, half an hour. It kind of, if-then things. So, but if I finish this, then I'll get a reward, not from my parent, but a self-reward, because, you're not gonna be there forever when they're in college. I want them to know how to self-motivate, self-consequence. and little things, and so forth. And sometimes I've seen parents get involved with, you earn the right to more screen time for littler kids. Not once they're in high school, that's kind of their thing. But there are certain rewards. If we get this, finish this task, then it opens up. We can go to this place, activity, whatever it is. And then consequences. Sometimes kids are struggling with their homework. They're not doing it. They're doing other things which may affect their grades. And then part of it is, there are consequences. If they're not doing their homework, sometimes they have to feel it, and they have to, get the lower grade. And I don't want parents to go in and swoop in and save, because sometimes facing the outcome that my behaviors impact my outcomes is a really important line to draw. You have to see, oh gosh, if I don't do this, then this sucks. So they have to understand that direct connection. But talk about the kids, talk about their goals, what they want. But sometimes they're going to have to, face their consequences of their actions. And if typically I've seen this, when grades start dropping, the parents start coming in closer. When the grades are great, typically parents start backing off. And kids tend to love their autonomy in most cases. But, parents get more interested when kids aren't doing well. And so what I want for them, as I talk about this, I want you to have more of your space again, your time again. And how do we get that? How do we get you what you want more of? Because what are your values? So if we can get this going right, then you get what you want. And I want you to have what you want. But then when there are setbacks, they didn't turn their homework in, they forgot this thing, what did you learn? What mistakes, so you end up getting a D, you didn't do these assignments, or you failed this assignment. And, does it matter to you? How can I help you? If you care about this, how can I help you achieve the outcome that you want? And failure can be a tool for teaching. Because again, if you deprive them of failure when they're in middle school or in high school, eventually they're going to fail bigger in college or after college. And I'd rather the failures happen earlier when they're more manageable and less epic. So early failures are better than late and strong ones. So, and when kids are struggling, then they pivot, they course correct, then they become more resilient. So, typically you become better when you face hardships, face a hard class, and power through it. You learn, I can handle hard things. And then you become, your belief in yourself increases. So you become more resilient. So having setbacks, having a challenge and going through it builds that muscle for later, because they're going to have challenges in college and afterwards in the workplace and life. So I like them having challenges earlier on. And that's something we call desirable difficulties. Learning how to overcome adversity is really important to build competent, skilled adults. These are important things. And frustration is part of the way. Some frustration is actually great. There's a framing of it called the gift of frustration. If you deprive your kids of all frustration, like when they face it and you aren't there, it's not great for them. And when you're doing deliberate practice, it's going to be hard. There's going to be some struggle. And part of it is understanding that struggle is part of the process. That's the thing with math. Kids who don't understand that math involves struggle. And struggling in math doesn't mean you're not good at math. It means you're doing math right. And kind of reframing that struggle is part of the process for mathematicians and people doing math. And the notion that if it doesn't come easy to me, I'm not a math person is nonsense. That even for math people, struggle is part of how you solve math. And so help them reframe. Struggle doesn't mean I'm on the wrong track, but struggling means I'm on the right track and I'm learning, I'm getting help, I'm getting resources and support. That means I'm a smart student, I'm a good learner. So it's called building, psychologically, we call it building some distress tolerance. I can handle some frustration without freaking out or crumbling. That you want that for your kids, I promise you that. So at Applerouth, we talk about the art of human connection and the science of learning and psychology. That's what we do. We do three things: academic tutoring, test prep, and EF coaching. We help kids with managing their space, their time, their resources. Now I'm going to pause for a second and we're going to go to just a brief quiz. I think we'll tee this out. It's 3 questions. It's just for you to fill out something. If you have it teed up, if you don't, it's okay. Oftentimes, maybe you don't have it teed up, totally fine. In which case, we're going to go right to the Q&A. So let me open up the Q&A and we'll do the quiz next time. It's just a quick query of who are you or your parents or teachers. We'll do it next time. No worries. All right. So you have a Q&A window and I'm going to keep mine wide open and take a minute. And what questions do you have about your kids? Questions you have about a certain subject or if I answered all of it, that's great too. But we have, I saved 10 minutes for the conversation. Now I'll stop it at 9 o'clock Eastern if you're on the West Coast at 6. Are there any questions? I'll give you a minute. How do I turn the train around with my junior? She has always been an A student in the last semester, and now she's bored. And again, part of it, so she's a junior, and now she's starting to flag her A's, or I would check in with her. You've always had your hands off, and now your hands are on. And so it's interesting. So they were self-directed, self-motivated. They were rocking it. Now they're a junior, second semester junior, and they're starting to flag. And so I would check in with them if they're hitting, and I've seen kids get burnt out. I have. I know students, some kids go to college and they're exhausted. And if they've been working, trying to do everything right, all the activities, all the grades, and I would check in. And so there's a question of, is it boredom? Is it burnout? Are you taking good care? Like, what's missing? She's called it. She always did 150, and now she's at 80%. So I would talk to her. I'd look at her schedule, and I find out, what are things that are restorative, that are refreshing. I had a student who was on burnout, who was actually getting a couple Fs. He was at Texas A&M. He was on probation academically. And I was talking to him, like, what are the things that help you get restored, revitalized, re-energized? And for him, to my amazement, he said, I go fishing. And there's a pond about half an hour. I go and I get my fishing rod, and that gets me recharged. And I'm like, okay. And also he had a deal with his parents that he would get this truck if he, got this GPA after he was failing. And so I'll get a picture of the truck and glue it to your desk. Like, this is a motivator. It's extrinsic, but I'm trying to figure out, for him, what gets him, and also exercise. A lot of people, the combination of sleep, exercise, the diet, other things like friendship. A number of my students, they're just, my goals, I ask them what are your goals, and they want to have fun. I have a girl who's a freshman at Michigan, and she's like, I want to get good grades, but I want to have a good freshman year. I want to have fun. And so it's looking at this balance. One of my students, he's a freshman here in high school in Atlanta, and he's like, what are your goals? And he's off the stimulant, and they pulled me in, the parents did, but it's I want to do several things. I want to get decent enough grades, but I also want to really engage and have fun socially. I want to have a good freshman year. And so when he's out with friends all weekend, and maybe he's not getting all A's, but you know what? The goal shifted from, it wasn't to be, he wanted almost all A's except for physics and math. Now Spanish is probably going to be a B, history is probably going to be, so he'll have 4 B's, 4 A's, totally fine. But he's having fun. And so he's not on burnout. So we got to figure out, what are the things that are going to recharge your daughter, and what's missing in her life, and what can we shift? And if you're doing too many activities for school, can we pare some of those down? Can we back off some of these to make your life more rounded? There are times I do a thing called like a life wheel with kids. It's like, how are things academically? How are things socially? How are things physically? How are things spiritually, with your family, like with yourself? And I go 1 to 10. I do a wheel and say, what's missing here, and find out, because kids often know what's missing. And sometimes, if they've been really grinding hard for 3.5 years, sometimes the wind, often it happens when they're seniors, but you may be hitting senior year a little bit early. So the question is, talking to her about extrinsically, as a junior, these grades really matter, and the last real grades the colleges are going to see. And you don't want to fall off a cliff at the end of, once you apply early action, then your grades don't really matter as much. But right now, these grades do matter if there's a college he wants to go to, and you don't want to be getting C's when you're a junior. But definitely talk to her in terms of, because again, whatever's happening now might happen when she's in college, when you weren't there. And so if they're hitting burnout in high school, you got to help them learn how to get through this. And again, students who go through adversity and come out the other side are stronger for it. So if they start getting burnt out as a junior, and then they recover and course correct, they'll be better off when they're getting burnt out sophomore year in college. Like, oh, I know things, I know how to query myself. I need more time with friends. I need more time in the woods. I need more time taking baths, or whatever I need more quiet time, downtime. This is a skill, it's a life skill. So I'd love for them to learn it as a high school student versus waiting until they're in college. Should I punish for bad grades? I am not a big believer in punishment. Although it's funny, my kids are still pretty young. In terms of all the theoretical psychology and motivational science, you want to use rewards sparingly. You want to use more informational verbal feedback. But punishment typically begets some negative consequences. And but there are natural consequences. If all of your energy is going towards other things and you're not focusing on your grades, saying, we have to do some of the academics first before we can go and spend all these hours doing the other thing. That to me is more of a natural consequence than a punishment. And so, we have to prioritize things, and this is important, but also, we'll earn the right, this door opens up when the academics are completed, or something like that, but that's not necessarily punishment. So I don't think taking away things that they like or important to them. I'd rather engage them, talk to them, because again, you're not going to be there forever. And if you punish them through and get them A's, once they go to college, like all bets are off. And so you might help get them in, but then when they're on their own and the stick is gone, I don't know. So I don't love punishment. It creates a sense of they're losing some agency and some of their own drive. Like they're doing it totally extrinsically. All right. So minimize punishment. All right. So she's 40% and still a 3.5. This is back from your student Beth. So yeah, so you're at 40% and a 3.5. Listen, a 3.5 A's and B's. It's not crazy. It's not the end of the world. You can still get into college with that. But part of it, if I ask her what her goals are, there are times what the parents' goals and what the kids' goals are, they're not totally in alignment. So what do you want? Last year you were at 4.0, you have a 3.5. Like what do you want for yourself? And part of it is, what do you want beyond academics too? Like the whole picture. What does you looking happy look like right now? And maybe you can negotiate, do you want a 3.6, 3.7, but maybe the 4.0 isn't going to be a thing this semester. But she's learning about what she needs in life, which to me is more important than you're stressed, you're burnt, and you go to binge drinking or more negative behaviors if you aren't happy or if you're depressed or anxious. So let's talk about happiness as being a chief goal, and not just this narrow reductive GPA. Claudine, how do you help a child, 8th grader, always struggle at disabilities? Very smart. Who approaches assignments as optional. If she doesn't want it to do it, or it's too hard, she doesn't just do it. Doesn't care about getting good grades. So it's interesting. Assignments are optional. I think, again, you can lead a horse to water. Can I make a kid finish assignments? She perceives them as they're optional. She's very talented, very intelligent. And, there are ways of talking about how in 8th grade, your grades in high school matter more for sure. But in terms of how it can affect your options for college, which as an 8th grader, that may be too far in the future, maybe too abstract. But there are times in high school kids, when if you need certain grades to get these certain schools, which you may want to go to. And then those experiences may be really fun or exciting or entertaining or, great football or great parties, but you have to get in there. And therefore, some of these grades matter for that thing which you want in the distance, if you're not motivated right now by the task at hand. But you can talk about, the grades, but I don't know. It's tough. Showing them how this can serve their values is one of the few things. But if they don't see the tie that this doesn't do a thing for me, it's harder for sure. And the idea of always do your best. I mean, I don't. Most of my students don't respond to that. Versus do your best when it serves you, when it makes sense for you, when it serves your values. But I've got to make a tie between the behavior and their values. Okay, what are some strategies you use with ADHD kids to get them motivated? 9th grade boy, EF coach, and nothing seems to work. We haven't found a motivator, getting more difficult to get them to complete assignments without crushing his self-esteem. What are some tricks with the really hard to reach clients? Well, in terms of, again, I've definitely worked with ADHD kids, and I'm always trying to find what they care about. And sometimes it's just tricky if the parents are coming heavy and the kids don't want the parents to be right, and there's a conflict there, there's a tension. Don't ignore the parents. But for you, what do you want for yourself? What possibilities do you want for yourself? What outcomes do you want for yourself? What opportunities? And if you get certain grades, opportunities appear, manifest. If you don't, certain doors can close for you. And what are you about? What are you interested in? What do you want? Can I find a way to tie what you want to these grades in any capacity? And the EF coach, there are times, and if kids are into it, then the EF coaches aren't going to work. I've had kids who resisted, who weren't honest with me with where they were, and then EF coaching is going to fall flat. You have to have kids who want to do well. And one thing, I've had students who get into a cycle of stress, and they get really behind, they get into a deep hole, and then they're just running and running and running to get out of the hole. And I asked them, how's that working for you? How's that feel? Is that serving you? Do you like that? Is there an alternative? And my thing is, what if we could structure a way of being where there's just less chaos and less stress and less running and less worry about failing? What if we had that? Would that be better for you? What would do you want that? And then I can help you set that up. I can help you avoid falling into the hole. And for some kids, And again, like the mastery, the coaching, whenever there's some success, I call attention, I reinforce it, and I say, what specifically did you do to achieve the outcome? I never let them ever write off a good grade. And we talk, and when there's a bad grade, we talk about process, what happened, what'd you learn about this? I try to make sure I don't use shame at all and use curiosity and interest in them. And let's get scientific. Now, I try to never ever use shame, but try to find if there is a motivator, and it may be that there may not be for a little bit, unfortunately. There are sometimes kids are just in a certain place for a time until they're out of that patch, which is harder for a parent to hear, but I've seen that too. How do I tell if my son isn't interested in certain subjects or may actually have a learning disability, ADHD? Some teachers comment on lack of focus. Well, you can talk to your schools. There's going to be someone who does evaluations, and it's a process. We actually do something called mind print at Applerouth. We pay it's like for $150. We do this. We outsource to a company who does these surveys. It's much cheaper than a psychological evaluation. Those are like a few $1,000s privately. But if you're in a public school, they may be able to provide that service. If you're in a private school, it's going to be out of pocket. So it could be a few grand, but it's often very impactful, very powerful. Getting a full battery of tests to understand working memory, processing speed, attention, inhibition, all these things. But this mind print survey, again, it's like 30, 40 minutes doing some of the same things as like a Wechsler or, a waist test, and helps give you a sense of some of these things. So if you want, the mind print thing could be a benefit. Otherwise, your school, the resource center, and the coordinator, or a private evaluation. Those are things we have. Okay. All right. What is it? It is now 9:03. All right, y'all. I believe that's my time. We're going to send you a copy of this deck. Hope you all learned a few things. Please share this. If you need any information, if you want any help with your kids, we do this for a living. Everyone, thanks for coming out tonight, and everyone have a great night.